Did you know that in this day and time, voter suppression tactics are still being used to dilute the vote? Voting is a key tenet of democracy. It is important that citizens have a voice in the society they live in, but unfortunately, everybody does not. According to authors at Scholar Strategy Network, restrictive voting laws have been passed that affect certain demographics such as students, Black communities, low-income communities, and non-citizen communities. This is relevant to many of you in this room because at least most of you belong to at least two of these populations, being Black students. My name is Amore Times. I'm a student at Prairie View A&M University. I also belong to two of these vulnerable populations, and I have seen voter suppression firsthand. These experiences have further sparked my curiosity, so for the last year and a half, I have been an undergraduate research assistant with the undergraduate research program. My project consists of me looking at a Supreme Court case called Shelby versus Holder, and the project uses a case study approach to track post-Shelby voter legislation, specifically restrictive legislation, and analyzing how it impacts voters' access to the polls. In order to encourage citizens to exercise their right to vote, it is important that we identify to voters how much power belongs in their vote. So let's explore the importance of acting on our civic duties by looking at how legislation can affect people's access to the ballot and how you can make a change. First, we will discuss how restrictive legislation, typically pushed by Republicans, creates barriers to the ballot for some populations. According to the Scholar Strategy Network, as of March 2016, many states had created new voter legislation. Although many of these states enacted expansive legislation, some states implemented restrictive legislation such as voter ID laws, stricter proof of citizenship processes, and shorter early voting periods. When justifying restrictive legislation laws, it has been argued that these laws aid to prevent cheating in elections. It has been found that restrictive legislation is more likely to be passed in states with Republican-controlled legislatures and governor offices. Within 5 years, between 2006 and 2011, 83% of restrictive legislation passed was by Republican legislatures. Restrictive legislation is also more common in states with large Black communities, non-citizen populations, and higher levels of minority voter turnout. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, minority voters lack adequate photo ID at a rate higher than other demographics. Nearly 25% of Black voters lack government-issued ID compared to the 8% of white counterparts who do not have access to government-issued identification. Photo ID requirements also place an undue burden on low-income voters. When looking to get photo IDs, you may have to bring in documents such as a birth certificate, which costs money to obtain, and sometimes it's a lot of money and may not be possible for low-income voters. Additionally, the reason why voter ID laws are typically a concern is because of voter fraud, although voter fraud cases are few and far in between. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund released a journal explaining how various states have attempted to impose dual citizenship registration, where citizens can register federally using federal forms and can participate in federal elections, but have to further prove their citizenship to be able to participate in state and local elections. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund also identified that these tactics have been historically discriminatory towards the Black vote. The LDF also identified how states made an effort to shorten early voting periods. Initiatives like Souls to Polls, which galvanizes the Black community to attend early voting periods following church, has been under legislative attack, with proposals to cut Sunday voting in places with large Black communities such as Atlanta, Georgia. Now that I've introduced you to some restrictive legislation intended to dilute the vote, I will now explain to you the importance of your vote. So, although efforts have been made to dilute our votes, perseverance is key in yielding strong results. For example, Rebecca Tibbett identified that in North Carolina, a large series of restrictive voting laws were passed, but despite this, Black voter turnout was at a record high the following voting year. You have the power to put people in office who believe in inclusivity, who put people in office who believe in making sure that everybody has the right to vote and that everyone deserves a seat at the table as much as you do. When you vote, you're not just casting a vote for yourself, but all of the Americans that the vote has been suppressed. When you vote, you also give those Americans a chance to be represented by officials with the desire to restore those rights. Now that you have a better understanding of how legislation impacts voter suppression and what you can do to help, I strongly urge you to vote. Today, I have identified voter suppression tactics through legislation and explained to you how much power is held in your vote. So remember, next time you think that your vote is just one vote, you are the voice of all that have been silenced.